Hey, I'm Jay Haley with Aux'Arc Climbing. We're going to talk today about making some larger holds. So, if you've been making any holds at all, hopefully you started with the smaller stuff and you've bounced into some of the bigger stuff like, maybe some feet or some larger edges, and all that's pretty straightforward. It's pretty easy to cast. But then you're starting to get into some of the bigger stuff, the really cost-effective holds that you want to get into. The first one I went into is this giant, massive chicken head looking thing. So, this is the only one this size that I have cast. I've got a smaller piece that's just the bottom part of it because I had no idea how much resin this was going to take. So we're going to start with this one, and we're going to work our way up through the process to this one. And we're going to talk about what I've done wrong, what I've learned, and things to consider. And then we're going to go right off of this into creating the hollow back for these larger holds. So, right off the bat, I've got this giant chicken head. The first problem I've got is that you can probably see the seam that runs right through here, just a straight seam all the way through. I couldn't find any foam big enough, so I started gluing plates of green floral foam together. And I tried to get it as tight as I could. I really worked hard to try and make that seam invisible, and it just didn't work. And you can really see it in a couple of spots pretty badly. It's still a pretty functional hold. I mean, it doesn't take away from the structural integrity whatsoever. It's just not a very nice, clean, polished process. It's not a hold that I would want to market out to people and say, hey, this is a beautiful hold, Class A sculpt. I would never do that with this. This is strictly for home gym. I'll throw this up at the gym at our local city. There's a city-run community gym. But they just need holds. They don't really care. There's no standard there for them too much. So there's that first issue. The other issue for this is the hollow back. So we're going to touch on this again. But for this hollow back, I just took blocks of foam and suspended them down in the process when I poured the resin in. And I really had no idea how big of blocks to put in there. I tried to shape it in there and hold it in there and look inside the mold and see what the edges look like, and I just way overshot. This is 1.5 liters of polyurethane. This is a ton of polyurethane for a home hold. It's really hard to justify the cost of this one, especially when we get into the silicone part of it. So this is the first big hold I did. It's a cool hold, it works, it's nice, it's comfortable. I've climbed on it a lot. It's pretty popular at the gym. It's the biggest hold I have ever made, but this is the only one I've got. This is the mold for it. There are a lot of problems with this mold. I had no idea how much silicone it was going to take to put in this mold. There's probably 5 pounds of silicone in this mold, and I haven't created inserts for this. If I'm paying $10 to $18, usually about $18 for a pound of silicone. If I'm paying $18 for a pound of silicone, we'll just round up to 20. This is a $100 mold that I took like 2 weeks of accumulating silicone for. All right, it's hard to justify that much silicone in a hold that I've only cast maybe once in an eighth. Again, I guess once in a quarter. I've only got the bottom quarter of this in another cast because I had no idea how much polyurethane it was going to take. There's a ton of silicone invested in this. I got so desperate to finish it that I actually polished it off with just some pump silicone out of a window caulk kind of stuff, just to get the last 1/4 inch, and that actually worked great. I don't know that I recommend it, but it worked great. There's a massive amount of problems with this mold. For starters, I have no support. When I pour it, I don't even know how I poured it the first time without it just collapsing in on itself. I actually wonder how deformed this hold is compared to the original sculpt because of the weight of the silica or the resin pushing these walls around. There's no support for this. You can see how floppy all these walls are inside of here. I really want to cast this hold again. I actually really like this hold, but it's going to take some major work to bring it up to snuff, and I think I can do it. But for starters, I need a form box, and I need something underneath here to support this hold on so it doesn't sink. And again, I need a form box that will keep all these walls rigid. And that shouldn't actually be super hard to do. It's just kind of a pain. And it needs to happen. Then I got to create the hollow back for it. And I got to do it properly this time, not just suspend foam down in there. The other problem is this stem. And this is the real main problem. Everything else I can kind of do. The other problem is this stem. This stem's about 4 inches tall, I think. obviously it doesn't work. All right, it doesn't work. So I tried to put like a pin down through it, try and align it and keep it straight, and that didn't work. So what I ended up doing is I think I cut a hole in a board and just had it like sitting in there, and that works, believe it or not. Like, this hole is usable. That kind of surprised me. I was a little worried about that going in. But in the future, what I'm going to do with this probably is I'm going to try and cut this stem out and drill it out to put PEX tubing in. So a lot of problems with this mold. I think I can save it. I really hope so. I put a lot of silicone into it, but and I really like the hold. I think I can save it, but there's a lot of problems with it. Again, real thin walls, a lot of silicone, real bad peg, very little support, and then on the hold itself, again, you have that seam from the foam. The hollow back is trash, and everything else actually I really like. I had to steal this hold back from my gym because it's not often it's not on the wall. It's actually a really good hold, but in order to cast more and really justify the cost that I sunk into the hold or the mold in the first place, because I do want more of these holds, I did a lot of things wrong. So let's go into my second iteration. For my second iteration, I didn't get quite as excited. I still consider this a pretty big hold. These are actually about medium sized, but it's considerably smaller than this one. This is a liter and a half of polyurethane, but the hollow back procedure is really trash. You know, I could probably get down to just a little over a liter, just because of how much thickness I gave those sidewalls. So a lot of mistakes with this one. Fun hold, a lot of mistakes. This is the next one I did. I did a lot better with this one. You can still see the seam here. I hit it a little bit better, but you can still see that seam. I got my logo in this one. That's another nice thing. But there's that seam still there. Everything else on this, I really like the sculpt. I feel like I did a lot better job with it. I've printed out 7 or 8 of these guys, and they're all great. I really like this sculpt. Again, that little seam kind of annoys me, but it's not bad. I have found, since I made this hold, I found Hobby Lobby has half dome things of foam, and that really annoys me. I didn't know about those to begin with, because I would have avoided that seam in the first place. That said, there are still some problems with this hold. I've done a lot of them, and it works great. It's all usable. I don't have to revamp any of it, but there's still a couple things I want to be aware of. So when I cast it, we're going to pull these out here. Here's the mold for it. When I cast it, I still built a box around it. I don't actually need the sidewall. I don't really need a form box for this as bad. I still kind of wish I built one, but the form box isn't as important for this one because these slope in so quickly. The only thin part of the walls is really at the very top. Once you get down into the hold at all, it thickens out very quickly. So these are actually pretty stable, and I'm pretty happy with that. The problem is with the hollow back. So on the hollow back, when I did this mold, let's see if I get everything going on here. I suspended foam down inside of there to create those inserts, and then I pulled once I cast the polyurethane, I left the hold in the mold. I didn't even pull it out of this one. And I suspended these bolts with washers and nuts locked on. I think I've got like a washer on each of these bolts. And I suspended those down inside of there and then filled it full of silicone sitting in there. That worked, and I've made a lot of holds with this. The problem is you have that foam texture all on the outside of this, along the inside of that hold, and that makes pulling these out a beast. I get a screwdriver there to kind of break it all loose and pull it out. You could do a mold release, but I will warn you that water-based mold releases will cause major problems with these holds. Major problems. So I would not do that. If you can find a mold release like that's not water-based, some kind of an oil or something like that, that might be alright. But I haven't found one yet. I haven't looked super hard because this still releases halfway decent without the mold release even. But that mold release will just cause problems. So be aware of that. That said, this works okay. The only reason I do kind of wish I did a form box is because I have to kind of freeform this over the top. And I know how it aligns, but anybody else that would take this hold from me would have a hard time aligning it and figuring it out. And I wish I had a form box I could just lock it down and it'd be the same place every time. The other thing that I learned on this hold is that I did removable peg stem, and that worked out really well. I originally had a T-nut sunk down in the silicone and had a PEX tube screwed onto it, and I was just never going to pull that PEX tubing out. However, that PEX tubing locks into the hold really hard when it forms, so I had to pull that out anyways, and then I ended up ripping up the floor here, and I've had to patch it since then, and I patched it okay. But now I just take PEX tubing, sit it down in there, and then when the hole's cast, twist it, pop it out, and that works great. So I've got a video on that already if you're interested about that process, but that's been really easy for me. So a couple of mistakes on this one. I don't like how I did the hollow back, and I went through a rough patch with this PEX tubing, and I kind of wish I'd done a mold box. So let's hop into the last guy here. Here's these 3 holes. Here's a sloper. Here's this guy. This guy is not really, it's probably comparable size to this. It's a little bit taller. It's maybe even taller than the blue one. This is my pinch hold, and I really like this guy. This turned out super well. Very pleased with this. We're going to talk about this process a lot more. For starters, I've got the screw holes. I've got that removable PEX stem in the middle. My hollow back is beautiful. Look at the hollow back on this guy compared to the hollow back on this guy. You can see how much foam is stuck down inside this one. I think this one might even be the original cast. You see how smooth the inside of this one is compared to this one? That's how much nicer this one is. I'm really happy with this one. This one also has a better mold. It has a lot of silicone in it, but I'm going to be able to cast this for a long time with no problems. I've got the form box built in. The mold will pop out of the form box, but when I'm ready to go, I can drop this in there, screw it in, and we're ready to roll. And it locks in only one way, so it's pretty standard and pretty safe to go with. I don't have to do any really minor adjustments or anything. It's super nice. The other thing I learned with this this insert piece is that I've got these filler blocks that actually take up a lot more room than just pouring silicone into these empty holes. So there's a lot more wood. I think there's another 3/4 inch board underneath this that takes up a lot of that volume. And then I didn't seal the wood. I just let the silicone absorb into that wood grain, and these blocks are never coming off. These has been fantastic. I've really liked how these turned out. So anyways, this works out a lot better. By far my best mold, by far my best hold. I've got the amount of polyurethane written on top. Really happy with how this one turned out. I've got a hole for the PEX tubing to slip through down into the mold. Keeps it aligned, and just been really pleased with how this turns out. So we're going to talk about the hollow back specifically. But if you're getting into doing these larger holds, you got to be aware of how much more time and effort you're getting into. It's a lot more complicated process. Again, you're looking at anywhere from 4 to 7 pounds of silicone going into this process, rather than just 3/4 of one for a smaller hold. You're not doing multiple holds for the most part, unless you're really just pouring on pounds of silicone. You have a lot more room for error with these ones. Not air, that also happens, but you have a lot more room for error with bigger holes. And if you have a problem, if you have a mistake, then you're out that much more money because something went wrong. God forbid the silicone gets messed up. That's always my worst fear when casting a silicone, because that's a lot of money that you got to cast all over again, and you probably have to reshape the hold anyways. Polyurethane, it's not as bad, but I have made a couple of problems with these sculpts. But for the most part, I've been able to save them anyways. They'll go on my own private wall or go on my hang board where I know what part that's damaged and it'll be fine. I have seen a couple issues, like with this one where I had my inserts down too deep and I made the front of it was too shallow. So that's been an issue before, something to be aware of. But again, with the form box, that solves it. So I'm really pleased with how this one turned out. And we're going to talk about this process right here, because that's really what makes these larger holds more efficient and usable. Otherwise, this would just be 2 pounds or 2 liters of a polyurethane, which is ridiculous. I mean, that's $40 to $60 a hold. That's not saving anybody any money. So you've got to do the hollow back procedure, but you got to know what you're doing, or you're going to be in more trouble than when you started. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an insight of getting into the larger holds and what to look for. We're going to go ahead and hop into this hollow back here shortly and get going with it. And I'm really excited to show you guys how this works. There's already 2 other videos out that talk specifically about doing this PEX tubing in the middle and talking about doing the screw holes, which with your larger holds, you're going to want to start looking at these support anti-rotation holes to keep your stuff from spinning. But these ones are all pretty centered on the hole. You shouldn't have too many problems. This one might if it gets off-centered, but really those are more or less just to make sure I could even do it. So I hope that gives you a little basics, gives you the information where to start with. Again, the cost efficiency is what you got to look at here. If you're going to only do 2 or 3 of these, I would consider doing them out of wood or just buying pre-made ones already like everybody else does. But if you're going to do 6 or 7 of them, I think it's probably justified. And I've already done 7 or 8 of the slopers. That's made its money back all day long. I've been really happy with those, and I think these will be the same way. So again, we'll hop into the hollow back, and I hope that gives you a lot of information you needed and get you going on making larger holes. So if you got any questions, let me know. Thanks.